Confetti Covered Quicksand, Chapter 6, The Clique. I went into public relations mode. The first thing that needed to happen was that I needed to slim down. It was completely unacceptable to be overweight in Los Angeles, period. There was no way around it. It was a sign of laziness and lack of dedication to your looks, neither of which would be permitted. If you couldn't afford to go to the gym, you needed to go running or something, jog in place for 10 hours if you had to. No excuses. In LA, the gym was more important than church is to most people. It's where images were made and maintained, bodies were sculpted, abs were flattened, and asses were tightened. Egos were pumped, confidence was gained. When people in LA can't get to the gym, they get very moody and cranky. I started going without food and exercising 5 nights a week, dripping with sweat while running up in the hills behind my apartment. One time a horrible rape was reported a few blocks from me. It had occurred on my exercise route. I thought about not going out running at night, but then I thought of my fat ass and decided to risk it. I felt desperate to be thin. It became the most important thing in my life above all else. If I ate too much, I simply induced vomiting, just as I had done in my middle school days. I spent a lot of time bent over a toilet seat with my finger down my throat. I also started taking laxatives. The idea of getting the food out of my body immediately appealed to me. I didn't want anything sitting in my stomach. It only took me a few months to slim down with the methods I was using, but I had to pay a price. I had to hide vomit-stained fingers, watery eyes, and eroded teeth. A few times the food got stuck in a clump in my throat and almost killed me. I was choking to death. The blood vessels broke in my eyes. A couple times I thought I would have a heart attack. The laxatives were no better. Sometimes I was in the middle of a conversation with a guy at work and I'd have to run to the bathroom so I didn't crap my pants. I could go on for another 4 pages about the torture I went through in order to slim down, but let's move on before you lose your own lunch. I had tackled the hardest part, weight. Next, I knew I had to figure out the grooming aspect. I started with the nails. I started getting manicures at some place where they asked me to pick a color as a greeting. Many times they would do a shitty job, for instance, cut the hell out of my cuticles until they were bleeding, or make the acrylic nails way too thick. But right away, so I had no choice. I went to them for my French tips. There was a salon called Alan Edwards that was right next door to Pow Pow. For those of you who don't know who Alan Edwards is, he is the guy who created Farrah Fawcett's famous signature cut. He did the hair of Suzanne Summers and Raquel Welch back in the day, and more importantly at that time, Renee Zellweger and Julianne Moore. So anyway, this famous salon was right next door to my work. The stylists, the colorists, the waxers, and assistants all came in for lunch. And we all made friends with them. And it was absolute insanity how beautiful they all were. Anyway, I tried not to stare at them. I made friends with one of the gay colorists, and he told me to come in and get my hair cut and highlighted for free. Yes, please. Then I started tanning. My skin was already olive and usually tan, but I felt I needed to be tanner so my blue eyes would stand out. I closed myself into the big old sandwich of lights, sweating my balls off in the bright purple glow. I wore my little goggles and listened to 92.3 The Beat Jams, hoping I didn't catch some sort of cooties from the sweat of some porn star who used the bed before me. I was broke, so broke after the manicures and the tanning, but I considered them an investment, and I was sure I would make the money back in tips. And sure enough, my tips increased, and I used that money for new clothes. I decided very deliberately that I would have a preppy schoolgirl baby doll type of look. I got the idea from a Patrick de Marchelier shoot from some magazine. I think it was Harper's Bazaar. It felt clean, feminine, and pretty, and I thought the pastels would look good against the dark tan and the dark hair. I wore baby pink, powder blue, sugary lilac, soft yellow, and pale mint green. I wore my new false eyelashes and some sheer, sparkly, vanilla-scented lip gloss, And it sounds completely preposterous now, but the look was a hit back then for some odd reason. Probably because it was different than all of the black everybody else in LA was wearing, and I stood out. I kind of snapped back into that vixen mode that I once knew. When I walked into a room, I held my head up, and I worked that shit. People turned around and looked, just because I looked so distinctive. If you're going to wear something that could be laughed at, you need to have a ton of confidence to convince the onlookers that you are cool and they are mere lay people. Inside, I felt obnoxious, but I made myself walk the walk. The third thing I knew I had to do was continue to align myself with other beautiful women. I was not one of those girls who wanted to be the prettiest girl in her group. My value would surely decrease if I were in a group of average-ass bitches, no matter what I looked like. Luckily, I was already hanging out with the prettiest girls I knew, my Hollywood girlfriends, who had also distanced themselves from our former crowd of hairband losers. The pretty clique was Missy, two of her friends named Liesel and Poppy, and of course my girl Bertie. Missy, last name O'Malley, had long, straight, light blonde hair and a deep tan. She was super tall, had a stripper body, and of course that beautiful doll face. She had dated rock stars and movie stars and had been asked to do Playboy. She said no. And she had these big sparkly doe eyes and a huge smile that showed all of her perfect white teeth. And she also wore pale cotton candy pink lipstick and black 1960s eyeliner like Brigitte Bardot. And if I had to think of a famous person to compare her to, I said Molly Sims before, but I would say right now, if I'm thinking about it, she kind of looked like the girl in the Cherry Pie video. She had that look. Real bubbly, happy, really fun. And again, she was just very comforting, like a blankie. And I always just felt good around her, like everything was going to be okay. She was sweet and romantic, and she just had a good heart. And you could feel it when you were around her. Liesel Stevenson was a coworker and a friend of Missy's. I'm trying to think of who she looks like today, and I think the closest person would be a young Charlize Theron type. She just real tall and thin, blonde hair. Hers was highlighted with some brown, and she just had really light ice blue eyes. And she was very matter of fact and did not take any shit. And she would always be the first to do something crazy like skinny dip, but she was also the first to defend her friends against any wrongdoing or injustice. She was really a mother hen. People always listened to her because even though she was a dancer, she could speak properly and she could talk her way in and out of things with intelligence. She had that bitchy Encino woman's voice that sent back food at restaurants and demanded refunds on things. People automatically backed down to her, and I always felt safe around her. Poppy Holloway had wavy, sometimes straight, but a lot of times mostly wavy, apricot-colored hair and big apple green eyes and huge silicone boobs on a tiny, slender frame. She was also tall. All three of them were taller than me. If I had to think of a face to compare her to today, I would say she had the young Denise Richards or these days the Margot Robbie face with those really big eyes. She was very sweet and almost childlike, kind of like a Marilyn Monroe-ish demeanor. And she had already had lots of plastic surgery at 24 years old, and the rumor was that she did not pay for any of it herself. She was very secretive about her job, and I figured she was somehow involved in the adult entertainment industry, like many of these girls were, but she told me she was a model. She had a twin sister who was an actress, and Poppy was relatively shy and a total homebody despite her line of work, and she often became very paranoid and would drive herself crazy with worry over something very minor. She could also scam the pants off any man in her line of sight. She was a pro. All of us were into drinking cocktails and cute outfits, dancing all night, and having a great time. Again, our former scene was officially over, so we girls migrated to the next party stop, the LA dance clubs. Yes, the Sunset Strip clubs in Hollywood were technically in LA, but they were music clubs where bands played. Now it was time to go mainstream, off to these other spots to hobnob with the movers and the shakers and away from the drunken musicians. My friends were the perfect patrons for these clubs because they were above average in looks and in measurements. Boob jobs and hair extensions were not commonplace among the public back then, but the dancers and the models, Had the long hair extensions, the blondest hair, the biggest boobs, brightest and flashiest clothes, biggest smiles. It was their profession to outdo the other women in the room, to get the money from their clients by any means possible. And I operated the same way. It was all about standing out in the crowd. The reason to be so overly done up to go to a nightclub in LA was simple. If you didn't look good, you couldn't come in. You couldn't just pay and get in. You had to be chosen by the doormen. It might be that way everywhere. I don't know. I just know that in LA, there was no guarantee that you were welcome inside the doors of an establishment. And it was no secret. Good looks and good bodies were the only way in. And I don't know how it worked with guys. I noticed that certain guys could pay off the doormen and get in. And as far as girls went, though, if they were overweight or not attractive, they were just shit out of luck and they just simply had to leave. There was always a crowd around the velvet ropes, people who were just standing there feeling more and more crappy about themselves. People that felt good when they left the house, but who were getting more depressed, thinking about why they weren't let in. They were thinking they should have worked out more, gotten more plastic surgery, dieted more. You could see their faces dropping, their inner voices arguing with them just to leave, to stop being subjected to the cruelty. But they would stay and fight the voice, thinking, maybe the doorman didn't see me. Maybe if I wait a little longer, they would be let in. And guys, mind you, when I gained weight, I was one of those people, and I literally had to turn around and leave. It was like the worst feeling. And I was ballooning up and down all the time, but this little chunk of the story, I happened to look good for like 2 seconds, so just humor me. Anyway, there I was in the midst of all this club stuff. I was newly 21, but I had been going to clubs since I was 16. So none of the politics were anything new to me. I totally knew how it worked. And I was pleased with myself for pulling myself together, and I was enjoying being in a big group of girls that made jaws drop. And I felt like things went into slow motion when we walked into rooms, and I somehow knew that I wouldn't always have it like that, so I just really enjoyed those little moments. Journal entry, December 25th, 1994. I just spent Christmas Day with Missy at a beach house in Malibu. I don't know what my family was doing. My sister and I used to get so excited for Christmas Eve at my grandparents'. There was always a big dinner and lots of decorations, and there was only one lamp on, of course, because the Italian house had to be as dark as a cave. And I remember the silver tree back then, early 70s, with red ornaments, lots of gifts wrapped in groovy 70s geographical designs. I can still see that wrapping paper. Silver paper with neon pink print, turquoise blue trim, and red paper with lime green, lemon yellow, and cobalt blue, and metallic gold designs. Aunt Billy's dog Skipper would tear open his own presents and shred wrapping paper everywhere. There was always a wooden bowl of nuts on the coffee table, Brazil nuts, hazelnuts, and almonds, along with a metal nutcracker. There was a glorious nativity scene on top of the mantel with bejeweled wise men and baby lambs encrusted with tiny pearls. Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus were all drowned in sparkle, and there were 3 heavy little red and green bells that sat under the fireplace and said, Joy, Noel, and Peace. One was long and thin, one fat and rounded, and the other a perfect bell shape. Being in school used to add to the Christmas spirit. We always made a craft of some sort, like a wreath of gold spray-painted tree pods or a paper Christmas tree. Each class sang a Christmas carol in the school show. You would always come home for Christmas vacation with an armful of crafts and candy canes and Santa Clauses with cotton ball beards, or a reindeer made out of the shape of your traced hand. My mother used to put up a little snowy town on top of her upright piano. There was a big sheet of cotton snow and little houses that we would light up with tiny tree lights. Our cat Max used to jump up there. She would be very delicate with her paws when she walked over all of the houses so she wouldn't mess anything up, and then she would somehow lower her body into the snow, and she thought the whole thing was for her, and she looked very regal in the town. Okay, so I went to the El Rey the other night, and I was dancing on the stage to Notorious B.I.G.'s Juicy, and the next thing I knew, that super hot guy from General Hospital, I think he was a Quartermain or something, was dancing with me. I was like, whoa, no way. We were dancing toward the side of the stage, toward some curtains, and he started being all sexy and was kind of backing me up, So I tried to be all cute, and I was dancing backwards, trying to feel for the wall. And my back hit the curtains, and I was going to lean against the wall, but I felt no wall. And the next thing I knew, there was a big poof of curtains flapping. My feet went up in the air, and I just fell backwards, and I saw his head looking down at me in shock. And his head got smaller and smaller as I fell backwards into the dark. And by the time I untangled myself out of the wings of the side stage, he was gone. Journal entry, December 28th, 1994. I went to some rap party with Anthony the other night. And not rap as in hip-hop, but rap as in a wrapped movie, W-R-A-P. He always wants me to be a total bimbo. It made me feel like shit last time. I realized people were laughing at me and not with me. I think I'm a game for him. He doesn't really care about me, but he's the person closest to me in my life right now. He's the person who's taking care of me. He doesn't judge me, even knowing every bad thing that I've ever done or do. And really, he isn't one to judge because he does whatever he wants, no matter how hedonistic. He says he's been not only around the block, but into neighboring cities. Anthony and Missy get along fabulously. They both make lots of cash and spend lots of cash, and they both keep things real light. They don't want to think about the problems of life. They really keep my spirits up most of the time. I'm not a big laugher, but I do laugh around them quite a bit, and that feels good. Bertie passed on going to Europe for the Heidi Fleiss people, but she's still in contact with them. She said she's doing some kind of voiceover work for some kind of CD-ROM thing they have, after she blew it with Charlie Sheen one night. They said they had her go out and eat a fancy restaurant dinner with him to see how her table manners were, and hers were excellent. But she wasn't quite right. And I wonder if that just meant she didn't put out. She does not do things she doesn't want to do. I will give her that. She would have totally said no. Journal entry, January 2nd, 1995. Anthony and I are cleaning for our dinner party tonight. It keeps accidentally expanding larger. Our kitten is sitting here staring at me. His name is Patrick, after Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, some book Anthony just read about a serial killer. I didn't necessarily want the kitten named after him, but our pushy, lame neighbor from downstairs convinced Anthony it was a great idea. We always humor him and feel bad for him because he's such a loser with no friends. Anyway, I miss Lestat. We lost him at the other house to the coyotes in the hills. I have realized that I'm getting shallower. I can only think stupid, vapid thoughts, and here they are. Number 1, I'm glad I didn't spend that $50 on those clear lucite stilettos from Fredericks of Hollywood for New Year's Eve, because I never would have worn them again. Number 2, my face is getting fatter. I need to get some anti-bloating pills to suck out the water. Number 3, I need to jog tomorrow, or I will not get the time of day from any guy. And number 4, Wesley is cute, and I'm embarrassed that I was so trashed in front of him at Club 70s. I knocked him right in the teeth with my skull. Wesley was a new guy that started working at Pow Pow. I ain't gonna lie, he was hot. He was a 19-year-old baseball player with tan skin, dark hair, and green eyes. He was really tall, and he had a low voice. He was one of those guys that's so stoned that they just laugh at nothing and say, "Whoa," a lot. Courtney Salzberg beat me to him and hung out with him almost immediately following his hire. She quickly reported to me that he had a son, hoping that I would be turned off and I would back off. I was like, bitch, please. I was dating guys wearing garter belts with pet ferrets locked in their bathroom. My standards were low enough to skim the sidewalk. One night, I pointed out Wesley to Anthony, and he was licking his chops. He said I had to get him over to the apartment so we could get him drunk. Jack thought he was too stupid to be attractive, but he was all for the train wreck unfolding. We were prepared to be highly entertained, so I invited him over to have some drinks, lemon drops to be exact. After a while, we started taking shots of water and let him keep drinking vodka. After telling us his mother told him he had bedroom eyes, he took one of the lemons we were using to chase the vodka with and wanted to show us his pitching arm. He threw a fastball lemon at our couch a few times. Then he must have been off because he threw the next lemon right through the living room window, and glass shattered all over my couch, and the whole window was gone. I wanted to laugh, but I was so pissed. I yelled at him and I gave him a broom and I ordered him outside to clean up the glass. We watched from the upstairs window as he swept up the glass from the driveway, slurring and laughing to himself. Anthony looked at me and said, "Damn, girl. He is dumb. Hot and dumb." I was planning to hook up with him, but he had ruined the moment and I couldn't act like I was okay with him shattering my window. Wesley admitted a few days later that he not only had a son, but he was friends with a psychotic girl who paid for all of his clothes and his rent. Okay, I thought, so you're like a musician. This is my forte. The girl was obsessed with him in a sad way. Well, I guess there's nothing happy about obsession. Anthony and I witnessed this. Sorry, you guys, when we took Wesley to Club 70s one night. The girl saw the love of her life with me, and she burst into tears. He felt bad for her and went to console her. I felt bad for her, too. I thought, I know how it feels. I'll let him go over there and say what he has to say. Sorry, you guys, I'm dying. I sipped my drink. And after a little while, I realized that the motherfucker was spending way too much time consoling. I marched over to them and I announced, "Time is up." I dragged him away from her crying eyes and broken heart. Hey, I was nice, but I was not that nice. Just when I thought Wesley's lemon-throwing incident was the dumbest thing I had seen him do, he decided to do something even more stupid. I gave him a ride to work one day. Of course, he had no car. And he shoved his baseball team health exam papers in my glove compartment while we went through the Burger King drive-thru on Ventura Boulevard. Of course, I had to pay for both of us. I dropped him off at work, and when I drove back home, I pulled out the papers to snoop on his ass. And I nearly choked on my chicken sandwich when I read that he had an extreme case of genital warts, and they were so bad that he had to have some surgery on his thingy. Great. Just because it still cracks me up, I have to mention that one day, when I left him at my apartment while I went to work, my neighbor from downstairs came up and said Wesley was doing jumping jacks by himself in my room. The neighbor said he just kept hearing this huge boom on the floor and he couldn't figure it out. Then he listened very closely and he heard a little clap after each boom. Dude, I know. January 2nd, 1995, journal entry continued. Anthony is still cleaning, and I am in no way lending a hand. He's also cooking everyone dinner, including my friends. I didn't just knock Wesley in the teeth last night. I also did some other really stupid things. I was hanging out with my transsexual friend Robin, and I was knocking people over on the dance floor while doing my disco spins. I hit my face on the wall after trying to tell Wesley off. I was taking people's drinks when they set them down, and I was just drinking them myself. I was spraying my friends' names on the wall outside with mace, and then I went home after being really, really mean to various people, and I made pasta. Anthony threw his keys in the fishbowl when we got home, and then we made this really, really rude, slurring, outgoing message on my answering machine. "This is a no-nonsense house, so if you have a problem, you can get the fuck out. We don't have time for fucking problems around here. Everyone really sucks," etc., etc. Our phone is ringing off the hook right now. People are probably trying to listen to that message. Journal entry, January 3rd, 1995. PJ looked at Wesley taking the long way to the back door while carrying a very heavy tray of food and said, "Wow. All good-looking guys are either gay or dumb." One of the girls looked at him and said, "Well, then what does that make you?" Life is no different today, except that I am now on the diet the rest of LA is on. Fresh spinach, brown rice, and water. My new boss asked me if I were modeling and how my actressing was going. Huh? My old boss, who was still here, came up and sniffed me really hard and said I smelled great and that his wife wasn't giving him sex, so he was on edge. Ugh. An old coworker who was recently fired came in and asked me out. I said no. And the hostess came over and said she was hanging out with an elite model who I would love. She said, and I quote, sorry, you guys, oh my gosh. She said, "She's really vain and shallow. You would love her. She talks about eyelashes and all that stuff." Can you believe that? I was insulted at that one of all the shit tonight. I mean, geez. I was talking to her a few days ago about how you try so hard on New Year's Eve to look better than you did all year, and that you end up looking worse. It backfires. I told her how I dropped my one pair of false lashes in the glue and how neither I nor my friends could walk in the shoes we were wearing. I guess I came off as vain and shallow. A different coworker told me last night that I have a great act at work. He says I project an image that people want and that people think I am way dumber than I really am. I didn't know what to say to that. I do know what I'm projecting, and I do market myself to my advantage. I have to do it. People take shortcuts. I depend on these tips at this restaurant to make a living. The only problem with doing so much pretending is that it's hard to develop and hard to progress. I'm getting further and further from who I want to be. I'm trying to think of good qualities I have, but there aren't many. Well, there is one I can think of. I don't lie often, and I also defend people who can't defend themselves, but I think that's just because I like getting into arguments. One thing that isn't good is that I turn on my friends a lot quicker than I used to. I don't return phone calls. I gossip horribly. I give away people's secrets because I forget which are private. That's an abominable quality. It really hits the spot when I gossip to people. I seek revenge on people who have hurt me at any cost. I'm lazy. This will go on forever. I don't think I'm a nice person. I've humiliated countless people, most of whom deserved it, but still. Sometimes I'm very cold and evil, and it makes me sad. I need to be stopped. I need to get back to the roots of the person I used to be. I don't remember the happiness my heart used to hold. It was really simple, and I just can't find it. Before all of the trauma of my crazy life happened, I was a wonderful girl. I'm embarrassed of what I've become.